My parents, met in high school and got married young and went through a very similar lifestyle that me and my wife went through. There was a time in their life where there was, quite a bit of partying going on, and when my mom was ready to slow down and start a family, I don't think my dad was quite ready yet, and they ended up separating for some time. And my dad found the Lord, and it brought him and my mom back together, and they made a promise to raise their children in church, when they started their family. And they decided that they would move away from Arkansas where they'd grown up and kind of get away from some of the people that they'd run around with. And Dad decided he wanted to go to a Bible college in Pensacola, Florida. And so they were going to school down there. And then a couple years later, I was born, and they decided to have me dedicated. And so my dad and me are on his job site one day, and I'm 33 years old, and we sit down to take a lunch break, and he tells me he's got to share a story that he's never shared. And he said, when you were born, we had you dedicated at this church. And I said, yeah, I remember you telling me that. He said, well, what I didn't tell you is as we were walking down to the front of the aisle, you were screaming and crying and making all this noise, and the pastor said, sounds like Zach's got a strong set of lungs. He'll probably be a singer one day. And everybody laughed. And he said, but then the pastor got really serious and looked at him and said, this child will be a voice for his generation. And, I'm sitting there in tears, on this construction site. My dad and me are crying. And I was like, Dad, why didn't you tell me this? And he said, well, I didn't want to put any pressure on you, And the thing is he said, we watched you grow up as a kid and never showed any interest in music. And we always wondered, what the pastor meant by that. He said, but you were always, a natural leader. People seemed to follow you. And then you came home in college and you took my guitar back and said you were going to teach yourself how to play. And he was like, I didn't think anything about it, other than you just don't pick up a guitar at 20 years old and start playing music. And he said, then you came home from school and you were really good and you were singing and you were writing songs, but then you got in this band. And he said, you lived this life that, me and your mother hadn't raised you to live. And so my parents, they would come sit in these smoky bars, night after night after night. And they would just pray that God would take all of this one day and use it for his glory. And so he said, when you started playing me these songs that you're writing now and this, stuff that you're writing for the church, he said, I'm not telling you to put any pressure on you. I'm just telling you because God's given you a gift. And, this is the platform. He's allowed you to live through and walk through a lot of these dark days to stand on this stage and, just share with the world how good he is and what he wants for you. And so that was kind of one of those moments where you're just kind of like, okay, I never like to share that because I don't want people to think I'm like going, oh, look at me. It's all about, God chose me. I don't feel chosen at all. I feel honestly unworthy of it most days because I know how I can mess it up and get it wrong more than I get it right. But it just goes to show that God can take the messiest parts of your life, and turn it into a message. And he can do that with anybody,